Good morning and welcome to our esteemed honorable guests, distinguished speakers and delegates to Made in Africa Conference Day 2. Thank you for making time to be part of this amazing event. And it's an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to welcome you all. My name is Harriet Kataba, and as from yesterday, I am now the CEO of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce. I am a storyteller, and I am an entrepreneur and an African through and through. Yesterday, we had an amazing time within sessions, keeping up with technology and surviving firewalls for some of us, being kicked out of rooms. And I love the tenacity to see through the whole conference. People were kicked out, they still came back on. And we saw it through, we made it through to the end. And I just want to congratulate all of you for making it through the end and surviving it. Our keynote was delivered by the Honorable Professor Dr. Ambassador Tol Edgars, the Group Executive Chairman, GBSH Consult Group in South Africa, whose impactful address painted a picture of Africa that left the listener pondering on where they stand. I particularly love the statement that he made. Africa is not underdeveloped, but rather in the context of cultural and history, highly developed in an advanced state of decay. This is something to really ponder on and possibly a conference on its own. The keynote presentation by Thebe Ikalafeng, founder and chairman, Brand Africa South Africa, on reimagining Africa challenged us to adjust where we spend our money, and most importantly, tell our story and speak about the greatness of the continent as we see it. We had different breakaway sessions that offered immense value and great insights to help businesses scale up and expand. I will end with these words spoken by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Africa needs back its economy, its politics, its culture, its languages, and all its patriotic writers. It starts within this conference, and it starts with all of us, because we all carry within our DNA the greatness of Africa, and it's up to us to really carry it forward and be a shining light so that other ones in the diaspora especially can see the beacon of hope and continue to carry the torch and the light wherever they are. So I will introduce the next session, which is the panel discussion, and I will call upon Debbie Tag, who's the co-chair of Africa Supply Chain in Action and Chief Operations Officer, Commerce Edge Africa, who will take us through the rest of the session. I'm also going to be in the panel, and I do hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference, and do give us feedback as well, because we really appreciate that. Leave the polls for us to be able to have a look and improve on this conference. I do wish you an amazing time as you enjoy this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet, for opening up and setting the tone for day 2. It's an absolute pleasure to be asked to moderate this morning's panel. And we've had some great discussion and debate prior to this. I wish we could have recorded all of that, but we will try and give you the highlights over the next 40 minutes. If we can ask our panelists to please come up onto stage. This morning, we're going to be discussing looking at procurement and supply chain and SME inclusion. And really, is it an empty statement or is it an important strategic concept? I think what is very powerful about our panel discussion this morning is that we have representation from the supply chain and procurement side, from incubator bodies and support organizations and business leaders. So joining us on stage now, as I think I'll introduce them as they come on. First and foremost, you all know Harriet, who's been our chairperson. So Harriet obviously will be talking and representing the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce, which is also one of our supporters of Made in Africa. And then below Harriet is Tanya Lamb, who is Stakeholder Engagement Relationship Manager, but I actually think that job title doesn't cover everything she does within SAPEX. And she is really the custodian around the SME task team with SAPEX. And as you know, SAPEX is Smart Procurement's partner and founder of the Made in Africa initiative. And it's their passion around supply chain and supply chain growth of small business and their skills that brings this about. So Tanya, welcome as well. Our guest panelist below Tanya almost needs no introduction, but we must, for those of you outside of South Africa. Clem Santa is a renowned speaker, independent scenario planner with such great vision and such great insight that he will also help set the tone of our discussion today. So Clem, I welcome you. I cannot see if, there we go, there's Dumi. So Dumi Jero is managing partner of Talanta, South Africa, so welcome. And Dr. Obiora on yet? I don't see, but Dr. Obiora, if he does come on and join us. So Dr. Obiora is the Director General of the Africa Center for Supply Chain in Nigeria and brings a very in-depth experience around supply chain within Nigeria and capacity building thereof. And last but definitely not least, we welcome Dr. Arjun Chula from Fair Trade Africa. He's the Executive Director and again, a founding support organization here with us. And I think without further ado, if we can get started. I am not seeing all panelists at the moment. I just want to see if there we go. There we all are. So welcome. We have half an hour to solve the problems of SME inclusion in Africa. And I think Harriet's going to keep us honest to that. But let's see how much we can share. And really the point of today's panel is to bring our various expertise, ideas and thoughts and suggestions, but most importantly to talk to the intent of Made in Africa, which is to have impact. And we look forward to your insights. To start off, I'd like to welcome up Clem Santa. Clem, if you can talk to us from your scenario perspective for 5 minutes or so and just sort of lay the groundwork of where you see economically and the reality of SME inclusion within the African continent. You're just on mute there.
Right. Okay. I'd like to just go into a bit of history first. We did scenarios in Anglo-American in the mid-'80s on what the global economy could look like in the 1990s, and we regarded that as a context for looking at South Africa political scenarios, which we did at the same time. But one of the big conclusions of that exercise was that Japan had forged ahead in the 70s and 80s by developing what we called a dual logic economy, where their very big companies like Toyota had forged incredibly close links with small and medium-sized businesses in Japan who produced the components for the cars and other products. And then they were finally assembled by the big companies. And Japan had a very low unemployment rate, and the model drove them into becoming a world-class winning nation. So we put that forward as one of the conditions if a country in Africa wanted to become a winning nation, that big business had to forge a close supply chain link with small businesses in every country concerned. And indeed, we still say that, and for two other reasons. One is that the world of work has changed. It's a flag that really went up at the beginning of this century, that big business was no longer creating the hundreds of thousands of jobs that it created in the last century because of new techniques which involve robots, artificial intelligence, automation, and so forth and so on. And therefore, the vast majority of the jobs being created in the world today are in small and micro business. The latest statistic by the American Small Chamber a small business chamber, is that over 2/3 of the jobs in America today are being created by small business. And we decided as Anglo-American in the 1990s to start our own project developing this dual logic economy, where we asked our minds to select certain objects that can be made for our underground operations and then ask small businesses to tender. We called it the SMME project, and we put money into these small businesses. We also occasionally put people on the board and we offered them advice. And some of them have been incredibly successful in that we're not the only client. They've got many other clients as well. And we feel that if we really want to make a dent on the unemployment rate we have here in South Africa, we're going to have to get big business to pledge, I think, at least 20% of its supply chain to the formation of new entrepreneurs in South Africa to help manufacture stuff which is required by those big businesses in the same way that Japan used this technique during the 70s and 80s. And then one last point is that climate change means that everybody's going to be looking at the carbon content of climate change and of the supply chains. And the fact is that we are all in the world going to be looking more at local operations because we've got to reduce our carbon emissions. And then this makes this model of big and small business working in harmony together to produce products even more essential because without a doubt, it's upon us, climate change, and there are going to be rules of the game set around the world to try and achieve a reduction in carbon emissions. So that's why this conference is very important and why small business in a supply chain is incredibly important. Because right now, given the changing nature of work, given the fact that we've got to reduce carbon emissions, we're going to have to concentrate on how we can develop this very close relationship between big and small business.
Thank you, Clem. I think that perfectly set the tone. And thank you for sharing the example of how Japan succeeded in this from a big organization. I think many of our audience and our panelists are thinking that's great because it's Japan. What about our local challenges? And perhaps to set and discuss some of those as a start, I'd like to call on Harriet. Harriet, in our previous discussions, you also raised some points around accessibility, competitiveness of SMEs. What do you think needs to be addressed in order for small business to deliver in a low-risk manner with big corporates and supply chain?
Thank you so much, Debbie. From my perspective, what I see is that SMEs definitely need the opportunity or the platform to be able to showcase some of their products. We do know that SMEs have got very small teams and are often very stretched. And I believe for them to be very competitive with regards to business, we need to be able to create platforms for them to be able to trade and to be able to take away the bulk of marketing and advertising. And platforms like Etsy give us a really good example with regards to this, because on Etsy, we have so many creative African entrepreneurs who've been able to put their products on there, which are able to be sold in so many different countries. And I guess that's something that I would like for us to possibly explore a bit further, to be able to have more of the African products, goods and services to be able to be accessible within Africa and outside of Africa. There's a huge demand for African products outside of Africa. I am based in the United Kingdom, and I will say to you that we do crave to have African products, African services. There's so many Africans in the diaspora who are very, very interested in accessing those products. So if we could find a way to be able to bridge the gap between the buyer and the seller in that aspect, we would be able to really help the small businesses to be able to scale up, to be able to be very effective, and to be able to be sustainable. One of the other things that I've been able to see here in the UK is a lot of collaboration. So the smaller businesses usually collaborate very effectively to be able to and support each other to be able to get the business. As a small business, it's not possible for you to be everywhere at once, but when you collaborate with other people, when they go to any space or any networking event and they're speaking about their products, they actually get to speak to other people who can refer their services and their goods to you. So I think being able to create that platform and being able to create networking opportunities for the small businesses in a local and international capacity would be very beneficial.
Thank you, Harriet. You mentioned collaboration, and I know this is a point that Dr. Madu is also quite passionate about. So if I can ask Dr. Madu to give us your thoughts and insight around how collaboration can better enable SMEs.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Collaboration is key. Today, even the big companies are collaborating. In fact, in supply chain, it is said that it is either you collaborate or you die. That is for everybody, not only for SMEs. For SMEs, it is key because of lack of competitiveness. Access to market is not easy. Access to finance is not easy. You hear so much about government intervention that doesn't exist really, doesn't get to the people who need it. So collaboration in form of shared services, that's one key thing. And again, we have this spirit of me, myself, and I. Finding it very difficult to collaborate with each other. Lack of trust. Everyone wants to be on his own. People would rather be managing directors of a dying company than be executive director of a company that is surviving. So it's also a mindset thing to share. So it is very, very crucial. The SMEs will have to understand. One is that you have a challenge, you are incapacitated. So you really don't have a choice other than to collaborate. But at least going by what is happening through outsourcing and the rest of them, shared services, government intervention can also come in form of incubation centers, shared services centers, and the rest. All this will help to reduce cost. SMEs are not competitive in Africa, and that's the way to go.
Thank you, Dr. Madu. I think we refer to government enablement and support of small businesses in the South African context. If I can just ask the panelists to mute, because I think we're getting feedback. In the South African context, it almost seems that there's too much reliance on government to make it happen. So I'd like to challenge the panelists' thoughts on if this could be achieved from private sector and not relying too much on public sector opportunity enablement. Very much going back to Clem's example of Toyota, think about the sheer extent of the large organizations that we have across the continent. And maybe I can reach out to Dr. Argent on this, and if you want to expand a bit more around your thoughts of today's topic. But Dr. Argent, in your work as Fairtrade and working closely with the small business themselves, and I presume also closely with supply chain, what is your experience?
Good morning, colleagues, and this is an exciting topic. I was looking at trade, now bringing back to policy issues on trade. First and foremost, policy is a prerogative of government, and governments decide how business can be dealt in each country. That's why you find that when you're dealing with multiple countries, from one country to another, you'll find some policy differences, and you need to come up with harmonization programs so that when you're dealing with international trade or home trade, you need some kind of harmonization on policies so that goods can move from one point to another or from one area to another. First and foremost is that you must have a very strong link with the states where you are doing these businesses. At the end of the day, if you don't take them on board, they will come back to you and tell you that you are doing their job. So the best way is to interact with them from the beginning, have some formal relationship with them, and then present to them certain areas or specific areas where the SMEs have challenges. And one of those challenges is high taxation. That's where most of these SMEs.
Oh dear, I think we've lost Dr. Argent.
So
hopefully he can carry on when he joins us back. And oh, there he is, Dr. Argent. We lost you for a minute. If you want to carry on.
Yeah. So what happens is that you need to be a player in policy drive. You don't need to be on the sitting bench and wait for them to give you the policies. You need to advocate for policy. And in our case, we have a policy unit, policy and advocacy unit, that deals with policy challenges. For instance, I can give you an example of what's going on between Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana in the cocoa industry, which is $60 billion industry. The two countries are the largest cocoa producers, but they have got different policies and different trade regimes. But they are two countries neighboring each other. Now, we have offices and operations in both countries. How do we operate? We don't have a one-size-fits-all. So we go to each country, we engage the government, we show them what is hindering businesses in regard to the SMEs or small farmers who are supplying to the larger markets. But most of these policies are just in 4 areas. Number one is the issue of infrastructure for the smallholders to operate on, because government is responsible for that infrastructure. Secondly is the issue of taxation. How do they deal with taxation for small producers? In most of these countries, you find the tax policy is 60% for all these big companies, 40% for company tax, but a small producer or a small business cannot afford to pay those huge taxes because their income and also their business net.
We'll just wait a second, see if he rejoins, because I really want to know what number 2 and number 3 and 4 is. Seems to have lost Dr. Argent for that point. Interesting on the taxation side. Are we back? Oh, Dr. Argent,
having some problem with connection.
Story of our lives. So welcome back, and we're dying to know what the third and the fourth.
So basically, those are the third area is. So the policy people need to engage with the states. There's the national policy and regional policy. When you're talking about national policy, it's very protective and so on, but there has to be policy to drive local business, local economic development issues. And the government needs to address those things together with us. If you leave it to them alone, you find you are at the same place every day and nothing is moving. So you have to engage and work with them. The other part that you find there are problems.
It's like watching a teaser and then we're just about to get the golden nugget. You are. So we lost the last sentence, Dr. Argent, if you would like to do that for us.
The last session I was talking about international. Thank you. The last session I was talking about international money movements or international transfers, payments of supplies and also payment of imports. There are a lot of charges when you deal with small businesses if they are importing some raw materials or some basic materials. There has to be some policy on how this can be done. Some policy, what we call some policy rebates or some kind of tax rebates on those kind of transactions. So it is about building the capacity of SME.
Again, let's just wait.
Don't know why.
There we go. Dr. Argent, I think we will leave it there. Oh, perfect. I just think we missed the last bit, but we get your points, and thank you very much for really unpacking the policy challenges and elements, and I think that's very important for this discussion. Possibly going back to sort of the what's in it, I saw it in the chat, you know, what's in it for them or what's in it for me, and going again to Clem's scenario. Tanya, as SAPEX, who really represents organizations that are your members that have large supply chains, why should they look to include SMEs? And maybe you can touch on what you've seen as an association and as a body, particularly with what happened with COVID and how that has changed things on the continent.
So we all know that from the COVID lash that's affected us is that many organizations didn't have risk strategies in place to cater to the loss of suppliers or not being able to receive goods from suppliers because most of it's offshore. So once China went into their COVID lockdown, many organizations were relying on China for imports of their goods, which caused an absolute backlash on our supply chains here within South Africa.
We now asking Tanya a question. Sorry, Tanya, please carry on.
So this had an enormous effect on our supply chain. So, you know, tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers, we need to kind of have a backup plan. So a lot of companies are now looking at onshoring or localization to source suppliers locally where they can rely on products and services. But again, the challenge to that is that it's sometimes more expensive to do that. I mean, obviously, everything that comes out of China is a lot cheaper. But I think that if we are to develop our economy, which we're relying a lot on SMMEs to do, we need to invest in the SMMEs in order to do that. So we need to say, okay, it's more expensive, it's going to be a little bit more effort, but if we look at the bigger picture and the long-term results, it's what's in it for all of us in terms of the African continent, because we can't do this in isolation. And I think in terms of supply chain professionals, it's on all of us to make sure that we drive this initiative to make sure it happens. Because if we don't, it's not going to happen. And SMMEs need our support through any which way that they can get it. So if, for example, you need to build KPIs in buyers or procurement managers' job roles to ensure that they are purchasing a certain portion from SMME businesses, then we need to do that. There are a number of different ways that we can do it. And I think that we need to put our heads together and think about how we do it from an African point of view. And let's not work in isolations in terms of legislation. We have all sorts of different things that govern it. But there's no reason why we can't put our heads together and come up with a strategy that works to serve everybody and helps Africa to grow, to support the people, because our population is expanding rapidly. I mean, I think in 40 years, we've gone from millions to over 1 billion, and that population's not going to slow down. 1 in 3 births in the next couple of years is going to come out of Africa. So if we can't support Africa, we have a serious problem, and SMMEs are the only way to do that.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Again, I'd like to link back. I think Clem raised a very important part around the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think if we look at it from the perspective that procuring from small business is it's one of the Sustainable Development Goals, but actually, I never quite realized the link around actually how it will affect positively our climate responsibilities and being more sustainable around our climate sourcing. So I think that was a fantastic point. And in the context of that, Dini, I hope it's not going to kick you out. So you seem to be here, solid. We've touched on a few points I know that you are also passionate about. You're passionate about small business, but you also realize what is the reality. And you've had some thoughts around the impact of COVID, the vaccine rollout, what would you like to share with us?
Yeah, so I think on my end, there is no doubt that government is actually a very key player when we look at the whole SME ecosystem. And post the COVID-19, there are definitely new pressures that are forcing them to even be more careful about ensuring that, you know, scarce funds are effectively deployed as well as utilized. So we can look at the role of government through two lenses. One, obviously as an enabler of SME growth, and obviously number two, through the delivery of targeted support, especially to high growth business. Now, one other area that government has been busy with, let's call it that, has been trying to curb or contain the whole COVID-19 pandemic. And now, while I express a huge vote of, call it, confidence in the sector, well, in the SME sector, I still feel that there will be catastrophic consequences, especially when we look at the retail as well as the hospitality sectors, if the SA vaccination deployments are not implemented quickly as well as effective. So I'm very concerned, particularly for South Africa, which to this day still does not have a clear vaccine rollout plan. Because even before the pandemic, SMEs sort of had to overcome economic headwinds. Now, looking at the current state of the SME sector across the continent, it is very unstable, especially in certain sectors. And in essence, both the private sector as well as the public sector have worked together to confirm that that there is no further damage, so that SMEs can survive the pandemic. So at the end of the day, large corporations and governments, which are often important customers for SMEs, are also struggling, affecting the whole procurement chain for SMEs. In addition, consumers are under pressure. All of these factors are creating the worst situation for many small businesses, and that is of big concern. The stimulus or the remedies that were promised by government are not coming in, and those are critical to the survival of many small businesses to help them climb the final hurdle of this pandemic. But even though it almost sounds like doom and gloom, we gotta remain positive. Good politics makes for a good economy at the end of the day. So a lot rides on how the various governments roll out their vaccines so that small businesses can get back to the race, so to speak.
Thank you, Dumi. I think very relevant points. Is there any of the panelists who would like to add on to what Dumi raised from your area of expertise? I think Clem would like to add something.
Dumi's made a very good point, which is this, that you know, that the pandemic has really hit the high street as opposed to Wall Street. You see these stock markets around the world, they've just gone back to where they were before the pandemic, and indeed in America they're hitting new record levels, and it just isn't. It's just such a difference between the kind of misery that the pandemic has created for small and micro business, and what's happening in the world of finance and stock markets. And so it is absolutely essential, as Dumi says, to get the vaccine program rolled out as quickly as possible, because that is the way that you're going to get the reopening of the high street around Africa and in other countries. And I find it surprising that some countries like the UK have really, in a determined way, vaccinated their populations, but other countries in Europe have failed to do so, because that is the key to getting the whole small business and micro business economy back into action.
Thank you, Clem. And I think there's in the chat, Roy Harrington asks, well, is globalization still relevant in today's economy, considering the effect of COVID? And very good question in line with what you've just said, where we're not consistently dealing with COVID across the world. Any thoughts from our panelists on that? Maybe Harriet, I can see that big smile.
I think the smile gets me in trouble. So with regard to COVID, I think the countries have been hit, yes, and I'll speak on the perspective of what is going on here in the UK, but also the possibilities of small businesses and the advantages that they have, which they probably do not see yet. So here in the UK, so many businesses have shut down. The small businesses have been hit really bad, and you know, it's a really sad state of affairs to see. But what I'm seeing is people are being very flexible, and I think this is the advantage that small businesses have. Whilst big corporations take a very long time to pivot and change the way they do things, smaller businesses can make very quick decisions, and I see that smaller businesses have that, you know, they have that advantage, and I think it would be very good for them to start thinking about now how to move forward with regards to technology. We cannot deny that the future is technology, the future is tech. Businesses will have more success when they integrate technology within their business. Most of the high street shops have been sold off, but it's the online shops that are actually buying them. You know, so many high street shops have gone into administration, but they're being bought by the online shops that have been running. When this online shop started, everyone was laughing about it, right? They thought it was very ridiculous because people wanted, they wanted to be able to go into the shop and do things. But this pandemic has shown us that taking a stroll to the shop and spending hours in there is not something that we really have to do. People are changing their way of life and rethinking what really matters. And as people are rethinking what really matters, I think it's also good for small businesses to be in that place where they can start to rethink how they do business and to pivot. So on a global level, we see people can order items from South Africa to here. So I don't see why we cannot have those small businesses utilize technology and be able to go global with their products. Now, I know COVID has affected everyone. We have an advantage here because of the jobs, but we might be possibly going into another lockdown. We do not know because we cannot fly, we cannot go anywhere, but people have to do business, right? We are grounded until November, where we have a third job that is going to be administered. So we don't know how many more jobs that people need to have. And we cannot sit and say, well, we'll wait for the jobs. I think it's time for us to really sit down and rethink how we do business, look at the systems that we have in place, and really pivot. As small businesses, I think we can do that very quickly.
Thank you, Harriet.
Thank you.
I think beautifully answered things. I picked on you, but I do see Dr. Argent, you have a comment. Would you like to add?
Yes, just to explain what we are doing in response to COVID from our side. We have about 726 organizations which are packed with SMEs and small farmers. And what we have done is we work on a model called socio-economic and environmental model. That's the approach that we are using. This model has been applied for the last 15 years, and it's still helping us. What does this involve? This involves having them clustered in different groups like cooperatives, and then come up with services that they need addressed to make this attainable and also accessible for them because of the cost of training and capacity building. Currently, because of COVID, we had the worst hit in the flower industry. We deal with the cocoa industry, coffee, tea, wines, flowers, honey, herbs and spices, and all that. We had a serious crisis in the flower industry because most of our market for the flower industry is in the north, and the flights were all cut off. So the grounding of oil aircraft meant that the flower farms could not export. And we had almost business dropping down to 30% in those sectors. But we came up with a program which we are calling recovery program, economic recovery program for the SMEs. And in that program, we have small grants to keep their businesses running, which they can get at quite an affordable interest rate. And we do an assessment, assess their business plan and how they are going to do some rescheduling within their businesses. And then we give them this small grant, more or less as a matching grant. Secondly, we also have a relief fund for those who are heavily hit. There were almost others who became casualties. So for those who are heavily hit, we also have a relief fund, which is just short term to make them come back to be able to survive. So the other aspects, some SMEs need some relief so that they can push on. The others need a recovery. And so the two models are moving parallel. For those who need recovery, are those who are not heavily hit and they are sustainable, but for them to recover from the shock that they suffered, we have some relief funds. Apart from the funds, we also have technical support that we have for them in helping them to redefine and also to rearrange or reorganize their businesses. On the other hand, we also have some technology support for this. We have also provided some COVID masks and all those equipments. Plus, we are also now looking at how do we get them vaccinated across these regions. In total, it's a population of 1.3 million people. So we don't have big constituents like countries, but we do have these businesses who are membership-based, and we respond to some of their needs. The problem that is there is that every wave is bringing different challenges. The first wave, it brought a lot of fear and trauma. The second wave brought in a lot of economic and also social dislocation. The third wave is coming up heavily with sickness and illnesses. So the third wave, we are looking for a new strategy to deal with it, because what is happening is that it has a very short span of causing death. For instance, currently Kenya is going through the third phase, and in that third phase in Kenya, some deaths are sudden. They just happen without seeing the symptoms of somebody sick. Now, how can you intervene with that? So vaccination has been rolled out, yes, but on vaccination, in our countries, we are facing two things. The first thing is that some vaccinations, like the AstraZeneca one, it has brought a lot of issues on the market. The second one is the JJ one, which is happening in the US. So now it's the understanding on which vaccine do people need to access. Is it the one that is there or the one that is also very risky and does cause problems? However, on the African continent, especially in the regions where we are operating from, we don't have those experiences of somebody gets AstraZeneca and has got those negative and bad impacts. So basically that's what we are doing. So we have some kind of a social package to deal with this and an economic package to support our SMEs. And then we also have offered some communication platforms so that they're able to communicate and what to do with COVID within their membership, because we are a membership-based organization. So that helps us to reach out to them easily. And that's what is going on with our teams on the ground.
Thank you, Dr. Argent. It sounds like a very comprehensive supportive program and the great work that Fairtrade is doing. I'd like to put to the panelists now a question raised in the discussion of how do you think SMEs can be helped to export more than import? So this is interesting. This is obviously talking more at the SME base versus the big company or the big corporate. What would your take on this be, your answer? Maybe just raise your hand, then I'll know who to over to. Dr. Madu, please.
Thank you very much. I think SMEs have first the challenge of surviving locally before we talk about exports. So it's really, first of all, a company that has succeeded locally finds it easier to export. Again, it takes us back to like we talked about COVID, we talked about all these. So many countries in Africa are actually doing nothing, or rather not doing much. So it's affecting, for example, in a country where you don't have power, how do you help an SME to produce? Let me give you an example. Apart from what some have done, there's a town, a city in Nigeria called Aba. It's regarded as the Japan of Nigeria because so much manufacturing goes there. So you need to went in there to set up a common facility center for the guys who are producing shoes. And the result was fantastic. In fact, in 2 weeks, about 1 million pairs of shoes leave Nigeria into other countries, even though they are not regularized, that they are like unofficial exports, which needs to be taken care of. So what I'm saying is that the SMEs, one way to do it is provide them infrastructure. The deficit of logistics infrastructure is increasing the cost of doing business, and these guys cannot. So you said earlier, how can the private sector do it without government? It is very difficult. If I have to dig a borehole for my water, buy a generator for my power, probably tie the road that goes down to my factory, how do I survive locally? So we cannot remove government from this. They have no business in business, but they have to create the environment. That, for me, that's it. Then exporters will then learn about exporting because it's a different ballgame altogether. That willingness to learn is also a challenge that I see. So,
thank you, Dr. Madu. I see, Juni, you'd like to add a thought?
Yeah. So I think at the beginning I mentioned that government is quite a critical arm of the whole SME ecosystem. So they could, and I agree with Dr. Madu that they could create a very conducive environment that will allow SMEs to thrive, right? So they can have, they can drive specific support to sort of unlock the growth. So for example, they could support export-focused companies. Let's pick an industry and say, for example, agriculture, for example. By setting up, call it maybe an export office for all SMEs to, and that will help to reduce the bottlenecks. And not only that, alongside the export side, but they could also, in addition, support the manufacturing and the consumer goods businesses that have the potential to compete with larger players and offer alternatives to imported goods. And this might include creating cooperatives in some instances. So that's something that the government should do, particularly when it comes to just creating an enabling environment. Step out of the way, let people do the work that they can do. And all you do is just offer the support system, the back-end office, if you will.
Correct. And maybe I must just highlight again to my point earlier about not relying on government. It was not from a policy or an infrastructure and enablement point of view. What we do see from a smart procurement perspective on a lot of the supply development and market access programs that we run is an over-reliance on small business wanting to get business from government versus targeting private sector. I'd be interested to know whether this is the same experience in Nigeria, or Dr. Argent, you cross many regions, although you are more on the agri-processing, so probably your cooperative clients are not government. But what do you see in your areas or in your fields?
Thank you, Debbie. First of all, government does not make policy in isolation. They make policy in consultation with the stakeholders. Then you have a policy that is responsive to what is on the market. Secondly, is that for government to make policy, there must be an agenda. What is it that policy going to address? And that is a feedback which they get from the public or from the stakeholders. In the absence of that, government will end up making policies that are not responsive. And that's why I mentioned from the beginning that you need to engage them. You need to have a platform that you meet them and you discuss your issues, so that when they are planning and they are going through a policy reform, they have a policy agenda which addresses some of those things, like in MSA. One of them, as I told you, that the biggest in the market for those thriving SMEs is the issue of input VAT. Everyone was rushing for VAT in all these countries, and they found that the SMEs were paying tax at every stage in their business, and that was depleting their profits. So government had to make a decision when like in Kenya at one point, if you're moving from one city to another, because of sometimes roadblocks and so on and other areas where there are tax customs people, you have to pay a number of taxes. If you're importing goods from somewhere through the port in Kenya, let's say Mombasa port, and you're taking to Rwanda, there were 15 roadblocks on the way. And each roadblock, there was a charge you are supposed to be given. That made business very difficult. But when this was brought to the attention of governments, they reduced those roadblocks to only 3. And this facilitated trade. So that's one of them. The first one is engage governments all the time. We don't leave them alone, because they need to know specific things that affect SMEs or any other business. The second part is that we need to have, you see, one of the problems that the SMEs are facing is that they are reactive. They are not planning in advance. So the concept of being very reactive or just reactive based is what sometimes disadvantages them. So they don't assess the market and maybe come up with some kind of focus on what's going to happen or what's expected, so that they plan for how they're going to respond to such kind of issues. I know the pandemic is something different, but business planning is about looking and scanning the environment even for the next 1 year or 2 years to come, for you to fit in the local market or in the export market. Then the third part is that government needs to come up with import and export incentives. For my team, my organization, we are export oriented because we are a global organization. There's a northern globe and the southern globe of our company. So the southern globe are the producers producing cocoa, coffee, tea, wine, all this. And the biggest consumers are in the north. But however, African Union has a policy that they also need to increase intra-Africa trade, which is trade in the south. But unfortunately, the trade in the south doesn't have the infrastructure, or it has a weak infrastructure to prevail. And that's a problem. So we are calling it south to south. And this led to the formation of what you have heard of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, or the Africa ACTFA, which is based in Ghana. Now, that institution is supposed to address intra-Africa trade, which is only at about 13% of the whole trade of Africa. The whole trade of Africa, Africa trades with the rest of the world 85% of its trade volumes. But within Africa, it's only 13% that we have intra-Africa trade. So the African Union is working on a policy on how do we harmonize so that at least we move away from the 13% to somewhere around 30% of our trade. Because now we are export-oriented, and then we become more import-oriented. The same things that we export, we end up importing them. And one of those is the issue of chocolates. Cocoa comes from Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. It goes to the rest to the other parts of the world, and it comes back as chocolate. So we don't need to export more and import more. We need to strike some kind of an export and what we call a trade balance, where you have imports and exports almost matching. But to be on a better side economically, we need to export more so that we have more revenue. And that those exports should be market-based exports. Let me tell you one of the examples that we have in the cocoa industry. Ghana government sells cocoa. Nobody sells cocoa to the world. Everyone sells to government. Government then offloads to the government, to the world market. In Cote d'Ivoire, the government allows free market systems to operate. It's a buyers and traders market. So there you find there's a lot of innovation because of that. But the issue is you need to put the infrastructure in place so that those market forces can operate and can compete, work favorably. So that's the part area. But we all understand that SMEs are in a weaker position. They still need hand-holding. They still need a lot of capacity building for them to have some kind of a good share in the market. Because in the market, there's bullying, and which is normally the case from the big guys. They can bull around, They can play around with the price. They can collude and make the price collapse. And then the SMEs cannot supply. So that's where government comes in to come up with a policy that protects the weak. And that policy, government does not make it in isolation. They make it in consultation with the stakeholders that are affected, so that there's an agenda setting for addressing certain specific problems in the market. And that's what we are doing. Some governments are faster. Some governments will need to continue knock on their door to respond to such kind of interventions. So it has to be really approached as a need basis and also country situation basis. The experts and the affected should actually voice out very clearly and very clearly to the right officers of government, and then government can respond. In most cases, when these programs are put in the right perspective, and when there is already an interaction between the government and the SME groups or whichever organization is looking after SMEs, these policies can find it easy. It becomes very difficult when you have no platform with government, when you have no engagement with governments. You only go to see them when there's when there's a problem, like something has hit you. For government to respond, they also take time. They want to study who is this partner. They want to know what is his base, who is supporting, is he really representing the SMEs? Because some of them are just fronters. They are being supported by people that have no interest in the SME agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Argent. In fact, oh, we've got 2 hands up. So Tanya, if you'd like to expand.
Okay, so I know that the government needs to be involved and support SMMEs, but we all know that government is slow to turn around and get these things off the ground. I mean, certainly in South Africa, it's a challenge to get into the right places, to tap into any funding that's available. It's not an easy process. So if we go to the private sector and look to funding from potentially European countries, US countries, so they invest a lot of funding to public health, for example. So they have an interest in Africa succeeding and wanting to improve the lives of South Africans, whatever the case is. What's stopping them from creating funding opportunities to drive SMME initiatives, to create opportunities to connect them with international organizations that want to procure their products and services? It's a big stretch, but there's no reason why it can't. If they can invest hundreds of millions of dollars into public health, yes, we need it, but how much of that money goes to organizations within Africa to execute and benefit from it? But on the flip side, yes, we need public health, we need people to be looked after, but if they don't have food on the table and they don't have housing and the majority of the population is unemployed, this is also a massive challenge. So these are areas of things that we really need to think about. I think we need to just turn it on its head and start looking at out of our box to see what it is that we can do. Talking about the taxes, South Africa has tax initiatives for private organizations. I know public organizations have a mandate that they have to procure so much from SMMEs, but there is tax benefits or tax breaks for private organizations to help SMMEs. It is quite complex because they categorize SMEs differently. So the small, the Small Enterprise, Small Business Act, I think it's called, and the Income Tax Act actually don't match up in terms of tax breaks and tax benefits. So there's some confusion there as well. So the minute that you start looking into government for help, you are going to face delays. But there are tax breaks, you need to investigate them. I think we need to look outside South Africa for funding opportunities and for help to develop our access to the international market. We've got lots of incredible resources, opportunity. We've got some incredible technological advancements in Africa. What are we doing about taking them to the global platform? And I don't think we should, we shouldn't be shy to stand up and shout from the rooftops about the good stuff that we've got going on and the smart initiatives. The question is, how do we get them out to the international markets so that we can bring some money back into our continent.
Okay. Hi, David. Can I go ahead? All right. Thanks, Tony. I think I don't know the kind of politicians we have in Africa, because when Dr. Agent was talking, it looks like the politicians in Kenya are listening a lot more than those who are elsewhere, like by reducing the number of roadblocks and the rest of them. In some places, it's like those who are making the policies are completely deaf and dumb, no matter the amount of engagement. I'll give you an example. We were having a meeting with the public sector over incentive, and someone from the public sector said last year we wasted so and so amount on incentive. And I raised my hand and said, no, you did not waste it. You invested it. And that even if it's only 30 to 40% of the number of people who you put that money in that succeeded, go and look at the multiplier effect on the economy. So it's just like, it looks like it varies region to region. We have a lot more challenges in West Africa, I can tell you. We have a lot more challenges. A situation that even to take your container of what you are exporting, I mean SMEs, into the port becomes a challenge, takes days, and you miss timing and the rest of them. So, but the truth is that particularly in the tech side, SMEs are doing well because some of the infrastructures we are talking about, you don't need it. But for Africa continuously ships raw produce, just like Dr. Agent mentioned. You ship raw produce, you ship jobs along with it. You cannot create employment. So that makes this SME inclusion a very, very serious something. I don't know how to get government to listen and be strategic in designing programs that can help SMEs into. Our guys are creative. They are ready. But the fact is that the policies are not helping matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Madu. I think there's also an argument, if we look in the South African context, where we have the Black Economic Empowerment Code that does drive enterprise supply development, which is really focusing on supply development. Unfortunately, again, we're very involved with it here locally and have taken the model to other countries, but it does seem to be that, unfortunately, it's been more of a compliance, and only after 10 years are organizations and corporates starting to see that if they approach it to have an inclusive supply chain, they see that benefit. So just talking around, Dr. Madu, saying how to get governments to make this happen. Even when we have governments that have policy, it takes collaboration. It also takes private sector to realize what the benefit is. At this point, there's a lot of questions. I'm sort of not sure which ones to go with first, but I'd like to raise one point. And because we have a lot of small businesses at this event as well, and we welcome the 65 countries that are listening in this morning, what do you recommend as a small business and as a supplier on the continent businesses need to look at to be corporate ready? Now, I put this forward in a recent survey conducted with quite a few procurement audiences across the continent. One thing COVID did is it increased their risk averseness. And many procurement buyers feel that buying from smaller business and local business is risky. I'd rather buy from the big organization, from the tier 1 organization, because I know I've got security of supply. Although Harriet argued, which I thought was a brilliant point, that actually smaller business was able to pivot a lot quicker than big business through COVID. So how do you suggest in your areas, a small business, what should they equip themselves with? What are the skills? What is the competencies that they need to be attractive to large corporates? Jimmy, if we can ask you to answer on that.
I don't know where Harriet is, but anyway, she mentioned a point earlier on that there's a need for small businesses to leverage on technology. And I think that's one of the major things that any small business can do. Leverage on technology as much as you can, because the world as we know it is now operating at the intersection of technology and something else. So you got to find a way within your business to introduce a tech element in your business, whatever your business does, even if it's agriculture, even if it's real estate, whatever it is, you need to find where your business operates and the intersection of technology. I mean, when was it? Last month, we marked the first anniversary of the pandemic that brought the whole world to a virtual standstill. And so we still don't know when this whole thing is going to end. And so the business landscape has changed more rapidly than ever. Some companies may no longer be at the forefront of their markets, let alone be relevant anymore. So you need to pivot, like Harriet was saying. The past year has been extremely trying for everyone. So SMEs have to evaluate how the world has changed for their customers to cultivate the growth opportunities. This may then, in fact, lead them to discover that perhaps their intended customers have developed needs for new products, or that some products or services have become less relevant in the current marketplace. So there's a need to be proactive and discontinue redundant products before inevitable declines cripple that business. By putting some of those changes, you are able to fit into the what the supplier, the procurement chain, call it, from the corporates are looking for.
Yeah.
I think that's my take on that.
Thank you, Dumi. And I was going to pick on you, Dr. Madu. What about supply chain? I don't know if that's going to be your point, but what would you like to add?
Yeah, I think also the absolute lack of understanding of supply chain principles is an issue. I mean, because the whole idea, it assists you to save costs. It also assists you to improve customer service and quality of products. When I'm speaking to SMEs, I'm telling them, because of globalization, the world is a village. There are no quality specifications for third world countries and those for first world countries. It's either you fit in or you are out. So if you're running a company, it's either you are planning to run a world-class company or you are planning to close down. So the issue is, these skills, are they affordable for them? That's another issue to look at. Is there anything we can do as associations to be able to bring these skills to these people at a lower cost or an affordable price? But the fact is that it is compulsory. If big corporates with all their size and strength recognize the fact that it is supply chain of one company competing against the supply chain of the other one, therefore elevate it to corporate strategic level, then it means that SMEs must be looking in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Madu. It's interesting how you raised that. So I was privileged to chat to the Executive Vice President of Toyota here within South Africa quite recently. He's been with Toyota for 40 years, and I just again think you set the tone with Toyota as our scenario and example. And he said, we are not a manufacturer, we are supply chain. Our success comes through, because making cars is easy. It's getting the supply chain right, actually, that gives them their competitive edge. And if Toyota is an example to go by, maybe we can share that with our audience. Clem, I wonder if I can pick on you for a little bit. We've given you some time off, but what would you say? You know, you speak about setting up Anglo Zimele, your experience previously at Anglo. What do you think the competency and capacity gaps SMEs need in order to enable and access supply chain opportunities?
Well, certainly in our experience, there have always been sufficient entrepreneurs in communities surrounding the mines that as soon as you make the offer to help people supply you, you don't have to worry about people coming forward. Obviously, the support system that you provide is critical, particularly in terms of the structure of the company, the accounts, and equally the financing of the company. So there is a large part of education involved in being a proactive supply chain creator. And certainly we found that out with SMME. And the other thing is that you must allow that successful entrepreneurs who really provide you well with the products and services that you ask for can expand their business and create other client bases, because we talk about SMEs, but of course, critically from within the ranks of the SMMEs come all the world-class entrepreneurs that really can change the economic fortunes of your nation. I mean, if you look at America, it's not presidents and politicians that have made America number one. It's the entrepreneurs like Henry Ford, like Walt Disney, like Bill Gates, like Steve Jobs. And they came from nothing. I mean, Steve Jobs started in a garage with Wozniak and created this incredible business called Apple. So I always think that it's not just about SMEs. It's about the fact that they are the birthplace of companies that really can change the economic fortunes of a country. So you've got to have that sort of continuity in development, so that you know, a certain percentage of those first-time entrepreneurs can really, really make it onto the world stage.
I think brilliant points that you've raised. Thank you, Clem. Harriet, thanks for see you back with us, which is excellent. I do want to pose this question to yourself as well. In your role on the chamber, what are your viewpoints?
I think I didn't get the question because it looks like I was off. Do you mind repeating the question,
No
please?
problem. We're just asking to the panel that from a procurement perspective, they want to reduce the risk of doing business with small business, and they need to see certain things. So given a lot of our audience sitting today that have joined us are small business, what is your recommendation that what they should look at? We've covered world-class supply chain. Dr. Madu mentioned that really any small business should be started and should intend to be a world-class business, otherwise it's going to fail. What would be your advice to SMEs or suppliers on the continent?
So I think one of the things that small businesses really need to understand is it takes a while to build your reputation, right? So people will trade with people with reputation. I know when we're doing business, we want to be able to make money straight away, but it's also good to keep in mind that as much as we want to make money, it's also about having that reputation, because people go to bigger companies and corporations because they've been there for a long time. They've withstood the test of time. I think the struggle with smaller SMEs is when people want to do business with them, they're not sure if they're going to be there tomorrow, right? And with a big corporation, it's not just going to shut down in one day. So there's that at the back of our minds, where really to persevere in business, because that's what it's really about. But also, I think in areas of partnerships, I keep saying partnerships and collaborations. It's a way of building your reputation, and it's a way of other businesses being referred to you. So not working alone, as Mr. Obiara said earlier on. We need to understand that the more we work together, the more we form partnerships and collaborations, the stronger we look as a business. And I think I would keep on saying that SMEs need to learn to collaborate. Big companies do that anyway, and that's why we can trust them, because we see them working together. It's not that their processes are any different than the smaller businesses. It's just because they look stronger. So partnerships for me, I would like to see more partnerships. I would like to see more people being able to work together, being able to persevere through business, because that's really what it is. I mean, Disney did not show up in one day. Amazon did not show up in one day. They went through hoops and loops to be able to get to where they are. And that's the reality of a small business. It's being able to withstand the storms and really being able to persevere. So I think that's one of the things that I would really say. But I would say that things are really looking up, because from a global perspective, and I know also in Africa, there's a huge, I mean, we know that the millennials have brought in a new way of looking at things and doing business. They want businesses that have a very strong social corporate responsibility. They want businesses that they can feel like they know the owners and they can be in touch with the owners. So I suppose with small businesses, they can also try to tell their story when they're doing business, because there are some people who feel connected to you by you sharing your story with your business. So making your business not just an entity that is out there, making it also part of your story. And we've seen other organizations do the same thing. So I don't see why the smaller businesses cannot do the same thing in being able to win over businesses and the trust as well, because when you share your story, someone feels like they know you. Someone feels like they can trust you. There's very small things that you can incorporate within the business, things like, what do you believe in? You can have your personal statement within businesses. That's a personal touch. And as someone who has done a lot of branding work and marketing, I can say that that is something that makes the consumer really trust your brand even without buying from you. So I think those are really things that people can do to be able to withstand the storm as it is now.
Thank you, Harriet. We've got a very well put question to the panel here. And I know we have touched on elements, but I think asking this and posing this almost maybe in a closing, before we do our official closing statements. So Chiamu asks, to the entire panel, how can we reduce the rhetoric and move towards action in terms of demystifying procurement and supply chain for SMEs, reducing and mitigating corruption risks in procurement and supply chain space, and ensuring real empowerment and localization? Also touching on the question here, but how are SMEs going to benefit in reality from the Africa Free Trade Agreement? Who would like to give us some thoughts on that? We covered it. Thank you, Dumi.
All right, so Tonya mentioned something earlier on that if you're going to wait for government, you will face endless delays. And just now we were speaking about how SMEs can meet what is required to do business with corporates, so to speak. But I think we also should look at it the other way around, where we say the corporates also should enable SMEs by focusing their supplier development for longer term scale as well as competitiveness. That is one of the ways that we can move beyond just the rhetoric and just talking. There are certain elements that private sector players can consider as part of their supplier development processes, and not for social responsibility purposes, but as a whole business imperative. So they could ask themselves questions like, are they able to develop a clear selection criteria for suppliers upfront? For example, they could define certain categories in which to develop suppliers. This could then be based on ownership structures or business performance or other criteria, right? So that's possibly one. Secondly, are they able to assess certain capability gaps that exist within suppliers upfront, and therefore develop plans to help them close these gaps? There could be, is there funding or capability requirements that can be built into the contract to create long-term sustainability? They could also, for example, simplify contractual terms and conditions and require paperwork for SMEs, because most of the SMEs, let's face it, don't often have large dedicated commercial teams to deal with these things. So with a supplier development, a supplier department, procurement department, looking at this. That's one way of moving beyond and actually helping these SMEs do better. They could even establish regular check-ins and course correction sessions throughout the life cycle of these suppliers. So this is one of the ways that corporates can move beyond the rhetoric and support and enable SMEs.
Thank you, Dumi. Dr. Argent, yes, would you like to add some thoughts?
Yeah. Thank you. We all understand that SMEs are the weakest in the equation, and in this vein, they need some kind of a helping hand or hand-holding. With the fair trade system, we have a model which I mentioned in the beginning, which is based on environment model. Now, when I say economic, I mean that for anyone to join to become a fair trade member, whether you're a producer or a trader, you have to have a certificate from fair trade. You have to be certified. We have a process in which we make them go through and prepare for that and support them so that they have the process. If you're a producer and you've got a producer certificate, it means that you can produce, and you have met the standards, you can produce and supply and export to any country in the world. You have met the standards. We have very high standards, and we have an organization within fair trade called FlowSet. They're actually based in London, in Bonn, and also in Cape Town. Who certify all our producers. When anything is leaving your farm, whether it's wine or your plant, whether it's wine or bananas or anything, or tea or coffee, it has to pass through a fair trade certification system, following the fair trade standards. So just that certificate gives you recognition that you are a supplier of quality products. You cannot just sell your products anyhow. You need to have that certificate. And then you'll find there is a label. If you look at the fair trade label, we have a fair trade label. All our fair trade products have a fair trade label, signifying to show that this product is certified by fair trade and it meets the requirements and the standards of fair trade. Now, because for any individual SME to reach that standard is so expensive and sometimes it's so rigorous and difficult for them, we work with them in clusters or cooperatives or associations so that it becomes cheaper in terms of economies of scale, and also it is easier to train and prepare a group to be certified than just an individual. But the certificate comes to you individually. So that's the entry point for you to join the fair trade system. You must be part of the system by being certified. Now, after certification, we pass them through a process of knowing the rules of international trade if they have to go into international trade. And then also specifying what role they will have to play, whether they will just be supplying or there will be middlemen on the way as traders. So whichever role they occupy within the supply chain, they are well tutored and well certified. You cannot just be a producer. If you want to be a trader also, you need another certificate for being a fair trade trader, because the requirements of a producer and a trader are different. And that has helped us deal with the issue of sustained quality of services and products. That way, when you become a fair trade person, most of the fair trade people are very serious people. They're very committed to their businesses, small or big, and they have this support system that prepares them how to enter the system and also how to function in the system. There are certain incentives which, when you are a fair trade producer, say you are producing bananas, and your price per banana is $10. If you are selling a fair trade product, if you are maybe per kg or so, or per ton, if you are buying bananas from fair trade, which have a fair trade label, there's what we call premium, and premium is the amount of money over and above the normal price. And that money, the premium, is money that comes back to support the services to empower the SMEs. Suppose I'm selling $10 per ton. So the price will be $10, but the premium may be 1%, 2%. So different products have different premiums. So that extra money, the extra $1 that makes it up to 11, is the money that comes back to deal with the social and capacity building services to sustain the members in the fair trade system. So that's how we have found it, that we cannot just ignore these requirements. They are necessities for them to be successful in international business. And we need to put those levers in place so that we can support them. This is what has happened with the fair trade system.
Thank you, Dr. Argent. I think it's a phenomenal model, and there are versions of it, but I don't think as scale. One of the things that we do know is that certification and quality assurance can be very expensive, and that is one of the barriers to small business working with and supplying to more global business. If I can maybe put one advice to our small businesses from a procurement perspective, what we see a lot of is try and understand your buyer. So the question was raised earlier was how to demystify procurement. Now, procurement talks a different language. So, Harriet, they do want the trust, but they need to communicate that trust in a corporate speak, in the way that you present your business. But I'll give you a perfect example. We will find small businesses that we facilitate saying, I want to do business with this retailer, and they want to meet with the buyer. But in a retail space, locally, this would be Woolworths in South Africa, they have indirect buying and direct buying, but the small business will keep hounding the indirect buyer for their bananas. Indirect buyers buying computers. So it's very important as well to understand your market and understand how the buyer looks at the market before even approaching them, because you might lose that initial connection and opportunity. So that is definitely something we've seen. We are almost at the end. I did say half an hour, and you probably all thought this is the longest half an hour of your lives, but it actually turned out our panel's 90 minutes, but it didn't seem like anyone was complaining, and this has been a phenomenal discussion. I think our audience, the comments are just flying, and the questions. If I can urge our panelists, maybe have a look at the questions on the right-hand side. We definitely weren't able to handle nearly any of them really, because there was too much to cover. So if you'd like to respond and give them some of your insights, I think our audience would really appreciate that. But I'd now like to have a closing round. We've covered a lot of ground and hopefully shared some practical examples and elements that those attending, and again, just to highlight who's in our audience, 65 countries, 49 African countries. Well, that was as of Monday. I think it's actually increased because we were still getting registrations yesterday. We have over 1,500 small businesses from 50 countries here, and we have 1,000 procurement supply chain buyers as well from, I think it's 55 countries. And interesting also, Harry, you talk about diaspora. It's been so encouraging to see the number that are based outside of Africa, that are Africans themselves wanting to push the made local and buy local agenda. So with that in mind, talking to this audience and in the theme of our panel of how to really support true SME inclusion, which we know cannot be ignored, and it's the only way that we're going to get true Made in Africa agenda, please give me your parting shots. I'm going to start with Tanya, who's right next to me, sort of, and we'll work around so you know who I'm going to pick on next. So Tanya, if you'd like to give us a few closing words.
Thanks, Debbie. I think for me, this is not going to be an easy task. There are many obstacles, there are many hurdles in the way, but I think we all know the importance of growing our SMMEs across Africa. And I think we need to look at it more like a talent pipeline, almost like you do with bringing people into an organization and making sure you've got the right people to do the right things. But having said that it is difficult and it's going to be hard, I think that the Made in Africa initiative is the start of something that's going to help us to take this forward to the next step. And it shouldn't be a case of where we have this great panel discussion, great event, there's lots of talk, and there's no action. This is, we've got to do the Made in Africa in action. We've got to make it happen. So we've got to put our heads together. We've somehow got to put together some small steps forward in how we do this. What are the easiest ways? I don't know if there's, for example, a portal. I saw somebody mention something about an associate system. Is there a robust portal that can list SMMEs across Africa? Can we audit them, small audits, like Dr. Argent said, where they give them that stamp of approval? Can we do something like that? Can we encourage organizations to give referrals, like Harriet says? They're not recognized. Big companies don't want to deal with them. They don't trust them. Let's give them that trust and recognition where they've earned it. So, yeah, I mean, I could talk about this for a very, very, very long time. It's something I'm quite passionate about, but I'm going to be quiet now and let everybody else have a chance. So let's not stop here. Let's take this forward. Let's keep this in motion and get some action going. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. And I think importantly, we do this as Africa. Let's stop looking outside of our continent to solve this issue. What we've learned and what we've seen as Africa Supply Chain in Action and Made in Africa is that we have the want, the innovation, the guts, the entrepreneurship, and the collaboration to achieve it all by collaborating across our continent. I jumped in there. Sorry, Dr. Madu, your turn.
All right, thank you very much. Just want to point out something. In a lot of African countries, foreign exchange is scarce. The big companies who are trying to import are having difficulty getting foreign exchange for those importations. I think that calls for a strategic positioning. If you are reducing the level of foreign exchange that are going out, it's also a form of local export. Because if those foreign exchange goes out, you need to export to be able to receive foreign exchange to use. So for that reason, the big corporates can become more strategic in getting SME to supply some of their needs, which they are currently importing, to reduce I know it may not be across the entire continent about the issue of foreign exchange, but at least I know across West Africa, most companies want government controls the foreign exchange. So you apply, they allocate to you what is available. So, but if you can concentrate in some local companies to reduce your requirement of foreign exchange, that way, that is also a form of export as far as the country's balance of trade and balance of payment is concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Madu. Jimmy, your parting shot.
All right, so SMEs, obviously, we've all agreed that they're a vital engine to the African economy. They drive growth, bring in jobs, especially among youth, and they're usually at the forefront of spearheading innovation. So over and above that, they keep the wheels of the economy in motion. So my parting shot is to SMEs in general to continue leveraging their ability to design and incubate new technologies, as well as new business models for a better future. Many of Africa's SMEs have the potential to become, call it tomorrow's large corporations, the unicorns that we want to see on the African continent. Because by producing those, that's the only way we are able to continue on our path of growth and prosperity. When the pandemic will end, we have no idea. We don't know. It's uncertain. So it's very imperative, therefore, that the bigger corporates put in efforts to protect SMEs. Governments do the same, so that we by moving with such speed and decisiveness, we are able to not only cushion the worst of the impacts of the crisis on the livelihoods of people, but to also ensure a swifter recovery for the broad economy. So it's teamwork for everyone: government, corporates, SMEs, all the other key players and stakeholders in the industry, in the game. We need to all work together so that we can recover faster as a continent. As it is, we're already on the back foot. So working together will actually give us an edge.
Thank you, Dumi. Working together for the same purpose, and that is to make our continent great. Clem, we can ask you to share some words.
I've really enjoyed being a member of this panel, and I think the wisdom has been incredible. I really, just as a futurist, would like to say that this century is all about democracy, demos kratos, people power. And if anything has shown that, it's social media and the impact it's having on the political and economic dynamic around the world. And in that sense, SMEs are not some side issue. They're now absolutely central to the fortunes of a country, particularly because work has changed in nature. So it's all about an entrepreneurial revolution being achieved for a country to be successful in this country. And that in many ways has to be ground up rather than top down. It's about providing the education, providing the enthusiasm, the money, but it's going to be a ground up situation. So, you know, I'm just saying that it is the number one issue. And, you know, doers don't change the world, thinkers don't change the world. Thinker-doers change the world. And we've had a lot of thought today. We've now got to have the action, because that is going to create a better world.
Thank you, Clem. Thank you for thinking and doing with us this morning. Dr. Argent, your closing words, please.
I've actually enjoyed this debate. It's my first time to participate in Made in Africa. I think it speaks of my vision as a person and also the organization we work for. We are in supporting African economic breakthroughs. SMEs are filling in a lot of gaps, and they are also very innovative. It is the SME sector that actually innovated mobile money. Some of you are using a lot of mobile money to move from one person to another. When SMEs could not use the banks, the commercial banks, to get money and transfer money to each other because of the cost, they innovated mobile money. And this mobile money is all over the country. They have managed to link mobile money to the banks, the commercial banks, because the commercial banks were losing their businesses because everyone was going to mobile money. Is cheaper to keep mobile money running on your phones. So that's an innovation that comes from the SMEs. So what are we talking about? It is actually a center of innovation and the creativity in our time. It lies around the information age. We are in the information age, and this information, they have managed to translate it into products, into services for even the bigger companies and also for the communities that they live in. Now, what is missing is the pillars to support SME innovations and also to popularize it so that it can be communicated and made use of by many that need these services. There are countries, for instance, in Africa, that are 80-90% of the economy is SME based, and they are doing very well. And I can give you one of the examples is Uganda. Uganda is a model of an SME country, and the businesses have managed to service the country and move it where it is. And what am I trying to promote here? I'm trying to explain the value proposition. SMEs should not be at the back. They should be in the front of our equation in our support and in programs. There is international support, there is local support, but we need to mobilize and strengthen them so that they can maintain their positions in both their supply chains and also as economic drivers in our countries. Because really, we don't need multinationals.
Just hope he comes back.
That's why we have the SMEs. In Fair Trade Africa, we have a very strong platform for SME development. Because most of the SMEs are the ones producing and exporting for the whole world. If you look at the tea industry, tea is grown by small farmers. If you look at cocoa industry, it's the same. If you look at the coffee industry, it's the same as the SMEs. And these, as they grow, they feed the globe, they feed the nations. And therefore, we are saying that this word is a word for all of us. All we need to do is to support one another, because we live by supporting and surviving with one another. The SMEs need that platform. Some countries have even formed SME ministries because they have seen the way these SMEs have contributed to the economies. And I really support that, because most of Africa is not multinational based, is SME based. Most of the multinationals operating in Africa, they are not from Africa. And for African economies to be driven, they must be driven by a strong local content participation, by a strong local participation of the user. And the SME sector is the one that we find in that space. And in summary and in closing, I just say the way forward is we move forward with the SME sector, we support it, we popularize it, we give them the platform that they deserve, just like we give the other big companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Argent, and for the amazing work that Fair Trade is doing. And we need to be supporting more initiatives like this and even creating more in other sectors. So thank you. Harriet, we started with you, and I'd like to end with you. So, don't want to say we saved the best till last, because it's been a phenomenal panel and I have no favorites. But since we are the ladies of orange and we start, let's end, please. If you can close for us.
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity to be with such an amazing panel. I've been able to take away so much from all of you today, and all the parting conversations, all the parting words. I really echo all of that. I would like to add on just two things. One of it is, we're saying it's good to move and not to wait for the government. It's really a good idea. But I would also suggest setting up parties or organizations that can come together and have discussions. The SMEs can have discussions, which they can have reports done, which they can then feed to the government. I am part of an organization that is called an all women's party. So we are all women from different political party affiliations, and we come together with different organizations, different SMEs, and we submit. We have regular meetings every month, and we support each other, and we also submit reports with regards to what we're going through as businesses. What this does is they can then compile it and then pass it on to the government, and the government always has an idea of what the women are going through at work and the challenges that they're facing, and they take this into consideration, especially when they're dealing with policies that deal with women and work. So that would be a good idea to kind of like think of doing something similar for the SMEs in Africa. And another thing that I would like to say is, I was part of a very interesting conversation and course that was run by the London School of Economics. And it was talking about managing the company of the future. One of the things that I want to let the SMEs know is that you're not alone with what you're dealing with. Every single SME is dealing with what you're dealing with in every single country. The big companies are dealing with what you're dealing with, only in a bigger capacity, right? So it's not an isolated incident. You're not the only one going through it. The solution is you have to be very creative in how you do business. The company structures that we used to have before will not be relevant in the time that we are going through. A lot of things have changed.
Dodgy internet has not changed, so let's wait. There we go. I think Harriet's back. I think given time, unless she comes back while I'm closing. No, there we go. Harriet, we lost you for a second. Last 30 seconds for you.
Okay, so just being able to be very flexible and creative in how you run your business, and this too shall pass. You know, we're seeing the issues, but there's greater opportunities. So do not just focus on what you're struggling with. Have your eyes on the opportunities, because that's where you're going. So that's my parting words.
Thank you, Harriet. I again want to thank each and every one of our panelists. I have enjoyed the engaging discussion. Look at those sums, if you can see that on your screen. There used to be a counter here, but based on the last time I saw so many thumbs go up, I reckon we're on 1,000, so that's amazing. I will close now our morning session. We do convene back here. I just want to check the time. We go into the breakaway sessions at 11:30, so it's now time for a comfort break. Now, by comfort break, to our audience,